Imagine standing on a piece of land that has been in your family for generations, soil that carries the sweat, the stories, and the dreams of those who came before you. That was Gloria's life. Her grandmother had fought tooth and nail to keep those acres safe from greedy hands, passing down not just property but a legacy. Every blade of grass, every oak tree, every stretch of fertile ground meant something. To outsiders, it was just 50 acres outside a growing suburb, prime land for developers to snatch up. But to Gloria, it was her grandmother's voice whispering in the wind, her ancestors' footsteps embedded in the dirt, and her future children's inheritance. For years, developers had circled the land like vultures. Some came with smiles, others with threats, but all came with the same purpose: to buy her out. Gloria refused each time. She wasn't swayed by promises of money, nor was she frightened by intimidation tactics. Her grandmother had always said, "Baby, when you hold the land, you hold your freedom. Don't you ever give that up for a few dollars." Gloria had lived by those words. At first, the HOA from the neighboring subdivision approached politely. Their president, a man named Carl Whitman, came with a grin too wide to be genuine. "Miss Gloria," he said smoothly, "you're sitting on a gold mine. Imagine what you could do with the money if you sold this land. We'd build a beautiful community and you'd never have to worry about taxes or upkeep again." Gloria smiled back, but her answer was firm. "This land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." Carl's face tightened, though he quickly tried to mask it. He left with a handshake. But she knew that kind of man wouldn't take no for an answer, and she was right. The polite visits turned into relentless pressure. Letters arrived weekly, each one offering a higher price, then threatening condemnation, then warning her about safety hazards if she stayed. When Gloria ignored them, HOA members escalated. They spread rumors in town, called her stubborn, claimed she was holding back progress, but Gloria never flinched. She had her papers, her deeds, surveys, tax receipts, all updated and airtight. She wasn't going to budge, and deep inside she sensed something bigger coming. Then one morning it happened. Gloria had just come back from the farmer's market, her truck bed filled with fresh produce she planned to can for winter. As she turned down the dusty road to her property, her heart froze. Bulldozers, cranes, workers in hard hats, lumber stacked high. Her fields, the same ones she used to walk with her grandmother as a child, were torn apart by machines. Wooden frames of houses stood like skeletons reaching toward the sky. She couldn't believe her eyes. Rows upon rows of homes, already in progress, stood where her sunflowers and wild grass had once danced. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel as anger surged inside her. She slammed the truck door and stormed toward the nearest worker. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. The man barely looked up from his clipboard. "Building," he said casually. "On whose land?" She snapped. "HOA land," he replied without hesitation. "You might want to step aside, ma'am. Don't want anyone to get hurt." Gloria's jaw clenched. "This is my land," she fired back. "You have no right to be here." The worker shrugged, smirking. "Lady, this land belongs to the HOA now. It's already been decided. You're lucky we don't call security on you." For a moment, Gloria thought she might explode. But then something in her shifted. Instead of shouting, instead of cursing them out, she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was sharp, dangerous. The kind that hides fire behind calm eyes. "Carry on," she said softly, turning back toward her truck. The worker blinked, confused, but Gloria didn't explain. She climbed into her truck and drove home, her mind racing. They had done it. They had finally crossed the line. And in doing so, they had walked right into her hands. Gloria wasn't naive. She had known something like this might happen. She had been preparing for years, keeping every document in order, every survey updated, every boundary marked. She had a lawyer, an old friend of her grandmother's who had handled land disputes before on speed dial. She had waited patiently, knowing that arrogance has a way of making people overstep. And now, they had overstepped. That night, Gloria sat at her kitchen table, papers spread across the surface, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp. Her grandmother's portrait hung on the wall, watching over her. Gloria touched the frame and whispered, "They think they've beaten me, Grandma, but they don't know who they're dealing with." Her lawyer, Mr. Thompson, picked up on the first ring. When she told him what she'd seen, he didn't sound surprised. "They finally did it," he said grimly. "Been hearing whispers around the courthouse that the HOA was trying to pull something slick." But they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. What do we do now? Gloria asked, her voice steady. We let them finish, Mr. Thompson said. Let them dig their hole deeper. The more they build, the more they lose. Every nail, every brick, every house they put up, it all becomes yours once we file. Gloria leaned back, her smile growing wider. So all I have to do is wait? That's right, he replied. Let them spend their millions. By the time this hits court, they'll be standing on your property with nothing to show for it. Gloria hung up the phone, feeling a calm sense of power she hadn't felt before. She wasn't the victim here. She was the hunter, and the HOA had just stepped right into her trap. The next morning, Gloria drove past the construction site again. More houses had gone up, and the workers didn't even glance at her anymore. To them, she was just a nuisance, a powerless old landowner clinging to the past. But Gloria kept driving, her lips curled into that same quiet smile. She knew something they didn't know. Every hammer strike, every wall raised, every road paved was not their victory. It was her inheritance growing before her eyes. They thought they had stolen from her. But in reality, they were building her empire brick by brick. By the end of that week, the land was buzzing with noise, dozens of homes sprouting up like weeds. Trucks rolled in, HOA members strutted about, and Carl himself paraded around like a king overseeing his conquest. Gloria watched from a distance, arms crossed, her grandmother's words echoing in her ears. The land is your power, baby. Never forget it, Gloria hadn't forgotten, and soon, neither would the HOA. The houses went up fast, faster than Gloria thought possible. It seemed like every time she passed her land, another row of rooftops had sprung into view, another street carved through the soil her grandmother once tilled. The HOA had worked with ruthless efficiency, pouring millions into development, all while treating her like she was invisible. Neighbors started talking in town, whispering about how progress was finally happening, how the new homes would raise property values, how the community would finally expand into something bigger, brighter, better. Nobody seemed to question how the HOA had suddenly acquired the land or why Gloria, who had lived on that land her whole life, now appeared pushed aside. By the time the subdivision was complete, 96 houses stood proudly where wildflowers and oak trees once swayed. Driveways were paved, mailboxes lined the sidewalks, and families moved in with moving trucks and laughter, carrying furniture and dreams into what they thought were their forever homes. Children played in yards, parents planted shrubs, and the HOA boasted about its vision realized. To the outside world, it looked like a thriving community. But to Gloria, it looked like theft carved in concrete. Still, she didn't move. She didn't shout. She didn't protest with signs or chain herself to bulldozers. No, Gloria stayed quiet, watching, waiting. The trap wasn't ready to be sprung, not yet. She knew timing was everything, and her lawyer had drilled into her head the importance of patience. The longer she waited, the deeper the HOA dug itself. And now, with 96 completed homes and nearly 100 families settled in, the moment had finally arrived. One afternoon, as she was tending to her small vegetable garden on the edge of her property, Gloria received a letter in the mail. The envelope was embossed with the HOA's logo, bold and self-important. She opened it slowly, already guessing what it might say, and sure enough, her suspicions were confirmed. Dear Ms. Johnson, it began, this letter serves as a formal demand for you to vacate the land currently occupied by the Willow Creek HOA community. As you are aware, this land has been incorporated into our subdivision, and your continued presence constitutes trespassing. Failure to vacate within 30 days will result in further legal action. Gloria chuckled, shaking her head. The arrogance leapt off the page. They truly believed they had the upper hand. They thought she was some old woman they could bully off her own inheritance, someone too powerless or too poor to fight back. She folded the letter neatly, placed it in a folder with her other documents, and picked up the phone. Mr. Thompson, she said when her lawyer answered. It's time. The days that followed were a storm the HOA never saw coming. Mr. Thompson filed a lawsuit that was nothing short of devastating. It was meticulously crafted, armed with every deed, tax receipt, and land survey dating back decades. It named not only the HOA as an entity, but also its board members individually, Carl Whitman included, for fraud, trespassing, and unlawful seizure of property. The suit demanded not only that ownership of the land be recognized as Gloria's, but also that damages be paid for the unauthorized use and development of her property. When the lawsuit was served, panic rippled through the neighborhood. Families who had just settled into their dream homes now found themselves at the center of a nightmare. At first, they didn't believe it. This must be a mistake, some said. The HOA wouldn't let something like this happen. But as the details came to light, the truth was undeniable. Every single one of those 96 houses was sitting on land that didn't legally belong to them. The courtroom became the stage for the showdown. On one side sat Gloria, calm, dignified, her lawyer by her side. On the other sat Carl and the rest of the HOA board, their faces pale and sweaty as they realized just how badly they had underestimated her. Rows of homeowners filled the benches, their voices hushed, their nerves rattled as they wondered what would become of their homes. The judge wasted no time cutting through the noise. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented," he began, his voice stern. "And the evidence is overwhelming. Ms. Gloria Johnson is the sole legal owner of the 50 acres in question. The Willow Creek HOA has no claim to this land. Every structure built upon it was done without her consent, and therefore falls under her ownership." The words rang through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed and whispers erupted as homeowners clutched each other's hands in disbelief. Carl tried to speak, stammering about community development and miscommunication, but the judge silenced him with a glare. "This was no miscommunication," the judge said coldly. "This was theft. Organized, deliberate theft. And this court will not tolerate it." He pounded his gavel, sealing the decision. 96 homes, 96 families, 96 properties, all legally belong to Gloria now. The HOA board sat in stunned silence. Their empire had crumbled in a single stroke. They had spent millions of dollars, bullied a woman who had every right to her land, and now everything they had built was hers. The fallout was immediate and brutal. News outlets swarmed the story. Reporters eager to cover the scandal of a suburban HOA that had stolen land and been outsmarted by the very woman they tried to erase. Headlines blared, "HOA loses 96 homes in land dispute. Black woman outsmarts HOA in historic court battle. Families left in limbo after HOA overreach." Carl became the face of disgrace. Once a man who strutted proudly at HOA meetings, he was now chased by cameras, jeered by neighbors, and drowning in lawsuits of his own. Families turned on him, demanding refunds, demanding answers, demanding justice for being led into such a disastrous trap. But there was nothing he could do. The law was the law, and the law was on Gloria's side. Meanwhile, Gloria remained steady, composed, and unshaken. She didn't gloat in the courtroom, didn't rub their noses in the loss, though part of her wanted to. Instead, she carried herself with the quiet dignity her grandmother had instilled in her. But behind her calm exterior was a fire of triumph. They had tried to steal her legacy. Instead, they had delivered her victory on a silver platter. In the weeks after the judgment, chaos spread through the subdivision. Homeowners who thought they had secured mortgages now realized their contracts were worthless. Banks scrambled, lawyers scrambled, but the truth was unchangeable. The land and every house on it belonged to Gloria. She could have ordered immediate evictions, sent sheriffs to clear the homes, and watched the HOA community crumble into dust. But Gloria wasn't reckless. She had something bigger in mind. And as the HOA members stewed in their anger, and the families looked to her with desperate, fearful eyes, she knew exactly how to turn their arrogance into her empire. It was never about revenge, it was about legacy. They had stolen from her, but in doing so, they had built her something far greater than she could have built on her own. And now, with the law behind her and the power in her hands, she was ready to decide the fate of the 96 homes on her land. The storm had already broken over the neighborhood by the time Gloria stepped forward with her decision. For days, the families who had moved into those shiny new homes walked around in a daze, unable to comprehend how the dream they had bought into had turned into a legal nightmare. Some cried openly on their porches. Others shouted at each other in HOA meetings that quickly descended into chaos. Some even showed up at Gloria's gate pleading for mercy, asking her to explain what would happen to them. Gloria listened, but she didn't answer right away. She knew better than to rush. Her lawyer had advised her to wait, to let the reality sink in for everyone before she revealed her plan. And so she waited, keeping her composure, watching the subdivision unravel from the quiet strength of her kitchen table, the same table where her grandmother once shelled peas and told stories about the strength of their people. Carl, meanwhile, had all but vanished. Once the loudest voice in every meeting, he stopped showing his face in public. Rumors spread that he'd drained HOA funds trying to cover legal fees, that he'd mortgaged his own house to pay off debts, that he was under investigation for fraud. Whether or not those rumors were true, one thing was certain. The man who had strutted like a king now lived like a ghost. But Gloria was no ghost. She was flesh and blood, steady and deliberate. When she finally called a meeting to announce her decision, word spread like wildfire. Families crowded into the makeshift community hall, the air thick with tension and fear. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with hope, but all of them knew the fate of their homes rested in her hands. She walked to the front of the room with her back straight, wearing a simple dress and holding a folder of papers. Her lawyer sat in the front row, ready if needed, but Gloria didn't plan on leaning on him this time. This was her land, her moment, and her voice that needed to be heard. "I know many of you are scared," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I know you bought these homes believing they were yours. But the truth is, they were built on my land without my permission. That land has belonged to my family for generations, and no one, not an HOA, not a developer, not a judge, can take it from me. You all thought you bought your future here, but what you bought was a lie." The room erupted with murmurs. Some nodded in agreement, others bristled at her words, but everyone was listening. Gloria held up her hand, silencing them. "But I am not here to destroy you," she continued. "I am not here to throw you out onto the street or watch these houses rot. What the HOA tried to use to bury me, I am turning into something greater. From this day forward, you are not homeowners, you are tenants, and I am your landlord." The room gasped. Some people looked outraged, others stunned, but Gloria's gaze never wavered. She let the weight of her words sink in. "You will pay rent to stay in these homes," she said. "Fair rent. Affordable rent. But make no mistake, these homes are mine and you live here by my permission. The money you pay will not go to some crooked HOA board lining their pockets. It will go into scholarships for young people in this community. It will go into programs to uplift those who are forgotten. It will go into preserving the legacy my grandmother left me when she told me, 'Hold on to this land, baby. This is your freedom.'" A hush fell over the crowd. The words had hit their mark. Some faces softened, realizing that she wasn't the villain in this story. Others looked bitter, unable to accept that the dream of homeownership had slipped through their fingers. But Gloria didn't bend to their emotions. She had carried too much, fought too hard to let pity undo her resolve. In the weeks that followed, the transformation of the neighborhood was nothing short of astonishing. Gloria's lawyer drafted lease agreements, each one binding, each one making clear that the land and the houses now belonged to her. Some families resisted, threatening lawsuits of their own, but those fizzled quickly. The judge's ruling was ironclad and there was no undoing it. Others accepted reluctantly, signing the papers with heavy sighs. And a few surprisingly embraced it, thanking Gloria for giving them a chance to stay instead of evicting them outright. The HOA itself crumbled. Without land, without authority, and with its funds drained, it dissolved within months. Board members fled into obscurity, some facing personal lawsuits, others nursing their ruined reputations. Carl lost everything, his house, his savings, his standing in the community. People whispered that he had moved to a trailer park 2 towns over, living off scraps of what he once had. Meanwhile, Gloria thrived. Rent checks began to flow in, steady and reliable. She didn't live lavishly. She never had, never wanted to. But she poured that money into building something that mattered. She established a scholarship fund for Black students in the county, ensuring they had the chance to attend college debt-free. She donated to community centers, funded after-school programs, and started a foundation in her grandmother's name to preserve the history of their land and family. Every dollar that came from those 96 homes was transformed into opportunity, into growth, into legacy. The families who lived there slowly began to see it too. At first they had grumbled about paying rent. But over time, as they saw the scholarships handed out, the playgrounds built, the food drives funded, some began to understand that they were part of something larger than themselves. Gloria never forgot where she came from or who had given her the strength to fight. On Sunday afternoons, she would sit on her porch with her grandmother's portrait beside her, sipping sweet tea and watching the sun dip low over the subdivision. Rows of houses stretched across what was once open fields, but instead of bitterness, she felt a deep, quiet pride. "They thought they could bury me," she whispered one evening, her voice soft but steady. But they built me a kingdom instead. The story spread far beyond her town. Newspapers, blogs, and even national outlets picked it up, framing it as a tale of justice, resilience, and poetic irony. Gloria received letters from strangers across the country, thanking her for standing up against greed, for proving that the underdog could win. She was invited to speak at universities, on panels, at conferences about land rights and community empowerment. Wherever she went, she carried her grandmother's wisdom with her, reminding people that land is not just dirt, it is history, freedom and future all wrapped together. Years later, when people drove through that subdivision, they didn't call it Willow Creek anymore. They called it Johnson Heights, after the woman who had fought for her land and turned the arrogance of others into her triumph. Children who lived there grew up hearing the story of how their homes had almost slipped away, and how one woman's strength had preserved not just her inheritance, but their stability too. And for Gloria, the satisfaction was never in the money or the power. It was in knowing that she had honored her grandmother's words, that she had transformed theft into legacy, and that she had built something lasting out of what was meant to destroy her. The land had always been hers, but now the legacy stretched further than she could have ever dreamed. The end.